This is Corey Willis with PPEI, and you're listening to the Diesel Podcast.
I'm Adam Blattenberg from Diesel World.
This is Dan, owner of Dan's Diesel Performance.
I'm Kaz from Diesel Doctor of Tennessee, and you're listening to the Diesel Podcast.
What is going on, Diesel Nation? We're excited to have you guys with us today on the #1 diesel truck podcast on iTunes. Today we're going to be chatting with Chris from Hot Shot Secret, and he's the president and CEO. He's going to be telling us about different challenges that exist with diesel fuels, the water content, lubricity, and things that can damage on old diesel trucks and newer ones. And really what we want to get into is how can we address these issues before it happens, before you need to buy a new CP4, before some common rail 5.9 injectors go out, whatever it might be. There's a ton of products they have. We're going to ask them how that all works together and fits together to be able to keep these trucks running and lasting, which is why we buy diesel trucks, because they're strong, they make tons of torque, and they last a long time. So we want to make sure that we get a full picture of what we can do any season, no matter where we're at, to keep these trucks running. All right, let's get to the podcast with Chris and learning more about diesel fuel and ways you can protect your investment. Chris, welcome to the Diesel Podcast. I'm excited to chat with you today and learn more about Hot Shot Secrets and all the different products that you guys have that help people maintain their diesel truck and lower their maintenance costs. We're glad to have you on today.
Well, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
We see you guys everywhere. We see you at a bunch of different races, at events, things like that. And I'm sure most of our listeners are familiar with you guys and your products. But I wanted to, for any new diesel truck owners we have or people that are just getting into it, I wanted to have you explain a little bit about what you guys offer for diesel truck owners and what your product line consists of.
We are a unique company in that we focus primarily on diesel. Early on, we started by working on a solution for the Ford 6-liter engine, and it was a problem called Stiction and had to do with the injectors that were an oil-fired injector, part of the HUE system. But from there, we started finding problems throughout the whole diesel industry. So when the manufacturer designs an engine or designs a truck or a car, they know there's certain problems that are going to happen, but nobody was really addressing it because the amount of diesels is so much less than gas. If you just go to any AutoZone or Pep Boys or any place and look how many gas products are on the shelf versus diesel, it's easily 10, 20 to 1. So in essence, we found a very underserved market, and we had a lot of really good solutions, and we thought, well, hey, let's start bringing them forward. And we started looking at specific vehicles, specific areas of concern, and then designing very specific, we call it problem-specific solutions. So we found a problem with lubricity, so we made a solution. We found a problem with internal diesel injector deposits. We came up with a solution. We found a problem with Stiction. We came up with a ssolution. So that's, in essence, what we do.
I think one of the things we hear from a lot of truck owners and listeners is they buy an older diesel truck, say like the pre-DPF EGR trucks, and they start to have injector issues or injection pump issues, or newer diesel truck owners that are looking to maintain that truck the best they can. I wanted to ask you, what out there in the real world has changed the most with the quality of diesel fuel in the United States that opens up these avenues to say, hey, even though the fuel quality's changed, you can still maintain or have the best operating diesel engine that you can?
The biggest change point was taking the sulfur out of the fuel. First, it's really important to understand that the specification that gasoline is made under is a very tight spec. If you can imagine something that's about a spec that's 3 inches long versus a diesel spec, which is about 8 foot long. So the federal government demands that you have, a very limited amount of cetane in there, and it has to meet a very minor amount of specifications. But beyond that, it's all over the board. If you compare the diesel fuel from Ohio versus Pennsylvania day by day, you would see vast amounts of difference. So that's the first problem. We call it the hot dog of fuels because everything's kind of thrown in there. The second problem is when they pulled the sulfur out back in 2007, it started off with low sulfur, and then it became ultra low sulfur. Now, the motivation behind that was the EPA wanted better fuel economy and less black smoke coming out of diesel engines. This was back in the 90s. The manufacturers went to Congress and said, we can't do that because the diesel supply is, just has too much sulfur, so it would just pollute the DPF systems or the exhaust systems. So those of you that don't know, the DPF is like a catalytic converter on a diesel engine. Just like they put catalytic converters on cars in the 70s, they're putting DPFs on in the 2000s. Now the problem is, just like in the 70s where lead would pollute the catalytic converter, that's why they took the lead out of gasoline. Here, the sulfur in the fuel would pollute your DPF system, so they had to take the sulfur out. Now, sulfur had two really unique things that it did for the fuel. One, it was a antioxidant and a stabilizer. The other thing is it was a lubricity additive, or it's a lubricant. Gear oils, things like that, use sulfur as a way to help lubricate between metal surfaces. So when they pulled the sulfur out, it did two things. It made the fuel much drier. It had a lot less lubricity, so you had a lot more wear. And the other thing is the fuel doesn't last as long. It starts to go rancid after about 30 days. So those are the two things that we're fighting with now, lubricity and the antioxidant effect.
And with, the newer trucks, so from 2008 to current, we hear different things out there as far as some of the OEM parts, while they're designed around ultra-low sulfur diesel fuel, they may not have the reliability there. And I wanted to ask you, what do you guys offer, one, to address that, the lubrication, especially on the newer trucks, but then, two is, even on the older ones, what can it do to help, guys who own 5.9 Common Rails or LB7 Duramax or 7.3 Power Stroke?
Okay, on a newer truck, every new diesel truck that we have in our fleet, we use a product that we make called Everyday Diesel Treatment, or EDT. It's not a real fancy name, but the idea was we wanted to put together an additive that would address every issue that the diesel owner would have. So there's a antioxidant in there to make the fuel stabilize. There's a rust and corrosion inhibitor, which, when you think about them, there's also a lot more moisture in the fuel today, up to 1%. So when that moisture drops to the bottom of the tank, it wants to create a rust spot or a corrosion spot. So we needed a rust and corrosion inhibitor to seal it off, a moisture dispersant to disperse any moisture that has settled out, and then lubricity additive and a cetane boost. So what we're trying to address is everything that's going to happen in the fuel system from the tank all the way to the injector tip, and detergents, of course. So every drop of diesel fuel that we use our Everyday Diesel Treatment in. And then as a once-a-year deep clean or a twice-a-year deep clean, we have a product called Diesel Extreme. Now, Diesel Extreme is a lot of detergent and a lot of cetane boost. And the idea was, over time, you get these crusty things that build up inside the system, and it's just from the poor quality of diesel fuel. We wanted to make a product that was so strong it would clean it out in one dose. So we've kind of put this together as a two-step treatment, and we call it, just a two-step treatment. It's kind of like going to the dentist twice a year and then brushing your teeth every day. Anybody that has a diesel engine, I would not run a drop of diesel fuel without additive in it, whether you buy ours or somebody else's. But the primary thing that you need right off the bat is lubricity. You just need to put some sort of lubricity additive in there to bring it back up to the spec that it was before. Recently there was a class action lawsuit against General Motors for all the diesel pickup trucks, and you can go back and research this. This all just happened, I think, 3 weeks ago. But in essence, what they said is the fuel pumps were not made for ultra-low sulfur diesel fuel, and they're prematurely putting metal shards throughout the fuel system because of lack of lubricity. So it's not like Chris Gabrelchik is saying this and you got to do it. Just go read the news and look at what's happening. So first of all, I'd make sure that there was a lubricity additive in everything. As far as like an older truck goes, I would make sure that there's a lubricity and keep the engine clean on the oil side using one of our additives, only because I'm trying to think of how to get into this without getting into like a 1 hour long discussion about it. But in essence, the new engine oils, to unwind this, to make way for the DPF systems, we had to back off of the amount of additive that goes into an engine oil. So the engine oil has less zinc and phosphorus in it. Now, if I have a 2005 GM truck and I go and buy what's called CK4 engine oil, which is what's on the market today, it has less additive than it did 10 years ago. So now I don't really have the protection that I needed. This truck was designed to run off of this type of additive, and it's most likely not going to hold up unless you top treat it. So we have several products to top treat it. We have a TBM booster, and then we have an engine cleaning system that will reduce the wear by about 50% and boost up the additives and keep it clean. So, and again, we're addressing these problems as the fuels have changed, the engine oils have changed. All the people that have pre-2007 vehicles were pretty much just left in the dust. And, the government said, in essence, that's your problem. So we're trying to fill the blanks.
Yeah, I think that's the really key part of it is, like you mentioned with the injection pumps on the LMLs and different things like that, is it's very expensive to fix a fuel system, whether it's a new injection pump, injectors, whatever it might be, compared to the cost of making sure you're proactive with things that can, help it last. And there's also millions of pre-2007 diesel trucks as well, where it's just like, you go anywhere and buy oil or, it doesn't have the things that truck was engineered to have. So it's it's really cool to see the aftermarket in what you guys offer to be able to address that. So you can, that's why we buy diesel trucks. We want to get a ton of miles on them, to last for years, use them to tow and haul and do different things. And what it's running on all the time, if it's not performing as it should for the fuel system, the motor, well, the repairs are very expensive, whether it's injection pumps or engines.
And you will absolutely have problems. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. If I have a 2005 Ford truck and I'm using a CK4 engine oil, ultra-low sulfur diesel fuel, the fuel and the oil are not designed for that truck. So, again, it's not a matter of if you're going to have problems, it's a matter of when you're going to have problems. The hardest problem for us as blenders and researchers is trying to get the word out and explain the differences between them and what you do need. It's almost like a prescription. You've got these problems. Which prescription do you go for? Well, there's 10 different medications. Well, it's kind of the same way with the diesel truck. We try to do our best to make it clear and concise and say, if you're driving this kind of truck, here's what you should be using as your preventative. Here's what you should use as your cure. Here's what you should use once a year. Here's what you should use every day. But it's not easy. And the general public has been, pretty much told not to add anything. Well, not pretty much. They have been told. Just read your owner's manual. It says don't add anything to the fuel. Don't add anything to the oil. Now, when your fuel system craps out and they charge you $2,500 and you say, but you told me not to add anything, they're going to say, yeah, that's life. And that's real life. That's happened to customers of ours have told us that. I had a General Motors truck, a delivery truck, and it was less than 1 year old and the fuel system went out because of corrosion. And they said, it's not under warranty. That's your problem. And they said, well, I would have added an additive to fix that. They said, yeah, it doesn't work that way. So they really do leave you in a lurch. And again, we're trying to fill the void with top-tier professional products that fix these problems, but getting the word out and explaining it is the hard part. We have a vast website that has all kinds of questions and answers. It's got a complete diagnose your diesel function where you can go through there and tell them the problem you're having, and it will give you the answer. And then we've got a staff of diesel technicians that will answer your questions on the phone. If you call up and say, this is what I've got, what do I need to do? They can walk you through and tell you exactly what you need. And, the great thing is that most of these products are inexpensive. Almost all of them are under $20. So this isn't, we have a few that are specific that are in the $50 range, but it's really inexpensive and easy to keep your diesel running at a top tier rate. Literally like brand new. That's our goal. How do I make this diesel engine run just like brand new at 400,000 miles? And so far we've got a really good track record of doing that. Again, it's finding the right prescription for the right truck is the difficulty, but that's what we do.
That's one of the reasons we're so excited to sit down and chat with you is, like, I see you guys have a weekly show, and I've seen it on social media where the guys will talk about different products, and it's something where I think we overlook it as diesel truck owners. We focus in on the performance or the appearance, but there's this huge underlying thing, which is what is going in my tank once a week or every few days or once every couple weeks. And it's just the repair costs. And we've done podcasts about it. how to know your injectors are going out, how to know what's going on with your injection pump, and those things cost thousands of dollars. And I think you're absolutely right. It's something that the awareness and getting the word out and the education is what's so important with diesel truck owners.
Well, what started that was I went on the radio one night and on a truckers program from midnight to 5, and we had all 8 lines lit up. I'm a certified lubrication specialist and certified for oil monitoring analysis, and it was just the opportunity for the average truck driver to talk to lubrication engineer. They had all kinds of questions because most of those people spend their times in manufacturing plants like at a General Motors or a coal mine, solving 6-figure problems. Very seldom do they get involved in a aftermarket type process like we're doing. So I seen that there was a need for this. People have questions. They want answers. They want straight answers. They just want transparency. Even as a certified lube specialist, I go to the shelf at AutoZone and I don't know what half of those products are. I mean, I can usually figure it out eventually by looking at SDS sheets and reading websites, but it's near impossible for the average person to say, okay, this is the detergent I need or this is the additive I need. So we started the podcast as a way to just talk about it, open the discussion. Look, if you've got a question, bring it up. If you want to know about your Harley Davidson or, the gas that's been sitting in your chainsaw or the engine oil that you're using in your Honda, send a question over and we'll answer it to the best of our ability. We've got chemical engineers on staff. We've got blenders, technicians, diesel mechanics, and we've got the whole realm here. One way or another, we can probably find your answer for you. And so far it's been a big hit. We've got a lot of people that are excited to have the opportunity to ask somebody without sitting on a customer service line for 3 hours.
Yeah, it's one of those areas where it's like there's tons of questions that you see on forums, social media, Facebook groups, tons of different things like, what should I run in my truck, or what about this or what about that? And I really like the idea of how you guys make it simple with a program to put together where you say this is what you need to run every day, it's what you run once or twice a year, and it makes it to where we don't have to think about it. We don't have to read sheets of data that I'm definitely not going to understand what's in it and try to make a decision where that's what you guys do, and you present that information in such a clear way. That's what I think is so important for the diesel community. And they're growing in popularity. There's people buying trucks whether they're new or old, and they're wanting to protect those investments. So I really like that idea of making it simple.
Well, and we try to make it like a step-up process depending on what your appetite is. Some people are crazy in that they don't mind tearing the whole engine out and redoing it. Then other people are the exact opposite. I just want to baby this thing until it finally dies. So we try to set up programs for each tier of what your level of appetite is. So the very low, the very first step into the process is clean out your engine, clean out your fuel system. That's our diesel extreme for the fuel and our Stiction Eliminator for the engine. And what happens is over time you have little hot spots inside that diesel engine where the oil shears and it burns and leaves a deposit behind. So we clean that off in one treatment. You just leave it in there for the whole oil change, and it actually reduces the wear by 62% and makes the engine, gives you a little more horsepower, a little bit more fuel economy. And on the fuel side, it's the same way. It cleans out the entire fuel system from the tank to the tips of the injectors. And then the next step is, we have the FR3 for your engine for every oil change, and then we have the everyday diesel treatment. And then for people that are a little more excited and maybe want to get into more, we have engine oils that are full PAO synthetic. It's the only PAO synthetic available in the United States. There's some available in Europe, but for the most part, everybody here is using a Group 3 base oil, and they call that full synthetic. So if you buy full synthetic Mobil or full synthetic Chevron or Shell, those are a Group 3 base oil. And the problem is, the more efficient the engine, the more it wants to shear the oil, and that's really where you have that need for this, high-grade PAO synthetic. So we make those available. Then we have bypass filters available for people that want to keep the engine clean 24/7. So we've kind of tiered it up where this, the higher you go, as far as your appetite, the more products that we have available. In the end, we have the ability to put together literally a fill for life system, with the oils, the additives, the oil analysis, and filters. We've got semi-trucks on the road that are running 200,000 miles between oil changes.
Wow.
We have cars on the road that are going 100,000 miles between oil changes, and when we test their oil, it looks better than most of the oil does at 3,000 miles. So the technology's there. It's, the willpower to do it. There's no vested interest in oil companies to have you buy less oil. There's no vested interest in engines or, car manufacturers to make your car last forever. That's not what they want. But we have the ability to do that. The technology's there. It's just a matter of applying it.
Now, I know it's still summertime, but fall and winter are going to be here quicker than we realize. How much does the program or the products change as we get into winter diesel fuel and some of the challenges that exist, for the northern climates where it gets cold and it can be like that for quite a while?
The two biggest things that we want to focus on in the wintertime is water and wax. Diesel fuel has wax in it, and we have to use a wax modifier to keep it from gelling up, which anybody that drives a diesel should know that. So we have our diesel winter anti-gel that you put in every time you fill up in the wintertime. And if you've not treated your fuel, if there are people, and this is perfectly fine, there's a lot of people that only add additive, when they need to. So like I go my whole year and I don't add any additive to my truck, but now it's December and it's cold, so I'm going to put additive in. Like if that's the case, if that's the type of person you are, then I would highly recommend using our Diesel Extreme first to get the moisture completely removed from the system. Because if you just think about this, the diesel fuel, it has 1% up to 1% moisture in it. So a 6,500 gallon tanker load could have up to 65 gallons of water. That's a drum of water. That's a lot of water. So as your diesel fuel gets colder and the molecules are pressed closer together, the moisture is pushed out and it's pushed to the bottom of the tank. Once it gets cold enough, like 20 degrees or 25 degrees, that water will get in the line and it will freeze. And it's just like a solid ice cube in there. And that's normally what we see. So that's why I recommend everybody, like this time of year, between now and October, run some strong moisture dispersion through there, get all the water pushed out, and then treat with your winter anti-gel to make sure that it does not gel up. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. That's a really good tip, because sometimes we just don't even think about that till we go to start it and it won't start, and then it's like, oh, what do I do? I've got, my fuel line's froze, it won't start, but there's a proactive way that truck owners out there can address it.
And if you've been, like I've been in the diesel arena and lubricant world for 30 years, and if you have been down this road, people that are listening to this that have been around for a while will know this. You can pull off a diesel line, hook up an air compressor to it when it is frozen like we're talking, and you hit it with some air, and it's the funniest thing. Those ice cubes come out of there like a pencil. I mean, it literally looks like a pencil coming out, and it's just solid ice. And again, what happens is it starts getting cooler. It gets down into the 40s. The molecules start to squeeze together. The moisture drops out of the fuel. Now it's in the bottom of the tank. And then you start the engine, or it just works its way down to the lowest spot because water's heavier than oil. It goes to the bottom. It gets into the line. And then it freezes solid at 32 degrees. And now the line is completely chunked up with ice. So when you hit it with the air line, it just shoots it out like an ice cube pencil. That's how I know. That's why we're saying run the water out first. Trust me, it'll save you. And the worst thing is it always happens when it's like 20 degrees out and you got diesel fuel on your hands and it's freezing and the wind's blowing. And you're thinking, boy, I wish I would have just spent $10 and ran some moisture dispersant through here.
Oh, yeah, and it's never on a weekend. It's always like during the week when you got somewhere to be or job site to go to or something like that.
Exactly right, yep.
Now, for those the listeners that we have are like, okay, I know I need to do something. I see the importance of it. Where can people find your products? You can find it at all the retailers. Tractor Supply has the largest selection of products, but O'Reilly's, AutoZone, Pilot, Flying J, TA Truck Stops, just even Walmart has a Stiction Eliminator on the shelf. Menards has a Stiction Eliminator Diesel Extreme. Our website, hotshotsecret.com, it's just the brand name.com, hotshotsecret.com. We have the widest selection, engine oils, bypass filters,
Everybody, if I had one wish list, like what's the one thing you would say? Use Stiction Eliminator and Diesel Extreme one time in your life. Just, the next oil change, put Stiction Eliminator in with your engine oil, and fill your diesel tank up with diesel fuel and put the Diesel Extreme in, whatever the recommended treat rate is. Just that one thing will probably extend the life of your engine by 25%. Again, it's just cleaning it out. If you could go inside, like the Magic School Bus, and drive and float around inside that engine, you would see all this black crappy stuff in there, and yellow varnish, and places where it gets hot, like your cams and the lifters and places like that, the turbo bearing. After maybe 1,000 miles, if you went back in there with the Magic School Bus, it would look just like a brand new engine. It would be perfectly clean and new. It seals up the rings. We have such a good track record. We've have over 500,000 bottles sold. The testimonials from people are huge. We've got dynos, race car drivers using it. All the testing we've done, all laboratory testing that we do to make the claims that we do. So it's really probably the best spend introduction level. Diesel Extreme, Stiction Eliminator. Start with that. If you're happy with that, move on to your daily treatment of always treating your diesel fuel, always treating your oil, and you'll most likely make that engine last forever.
I would also encourage listeners too to go subscribe to you guys on Instagram, Facebook. There's tons of great information, and it's so informational. It's not like it's not like a commercial or anything. The things that you guys cover in there, they apply across the board, and I've learned a ton just watching the weekly shows or checking out posts or going on the site and reading things. So I would encourage people, if they want to make that engine last, which they're not cheap, if you got to replace one or fuel systems, it's worth spending a little bit of time and reading and then just making the investment. It's much smaller than a long block.
I'm glad you said that, Patrick. We are ramping that up. We actually have an education department now, and they're pumping out content on a daily basis, and we have our own video crew. We've hired a video crew to start doing how-to videos. How do you change an injector? How do you change the air breather? That type of thing. Because what we found is there's a lot of first-time diesel owners out there, and they don't know anything about it. Where we're used to talking to people that are 50 to 60 years old, and they've had diesels their whole life. So now we have this whole new group of people. So we put together a whole program to try to extrapolate all that information that we have here in the building and get it out to the public. So we should see you should see a huge increase of that educational materials coming out over the next 90 days, and then from there on, it should be on a regular cadence.
It was really cool to chat with you today, Chris, and there was insights you gave that I never quite thought about, and I'm sure that there will be tons of feedback and questions that people have, but it's such a needed topic for us to discuss and introduce to those diesel owners, whether they've had them their whole life or whether this is their first one and they just got it and they just want to make sure their hard-earned money lasts. So we appreciate your time today and the expertise and the products that you guys offer for diesel truck owners out there.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me, and let me know if you have any questions.
Don't forget, diesel fans, for any questions you might have about fuel additives, different things you can do to keep your truck running the way you want, go check out Hot Shot Secret on Facebook, Instagram. They've got a ton of great content on their website and on their social media pages. If you want to learn more, if you have questions, you can give them a call and keep your truck running the way you want. Till next time, keep the shiny side up.